Folks, we back again another Tuesday, another awesome event. We're going to kick it off to you. Creative Financing with JB, with my main man, Mr. Melvin Henson. I know some of y'all folks out there trying to find them houses, trying to understand how you can get those houses fixed up and live in them. They not investment properties, so we got a whole different game here, but we're going to talk to the expert specialist right here. 203K loans, 203K. As you probably heard before, they're like a repair loan. They're like people will consider them like almost a investor fix and flip, but only for your primary residence. There's so many things that happen in this 203K, but the first thing you got to have is a consulting. Don't go out there, find his house. Don't talk to no consultant and start writing offers in there, because we're going to be in trouble. Because what needs to happen, we have to have some counsel there, so y'all can get the best possible information ever. We have guidelines. It's guidelines that we have to follow for. It's steps that we got to go through. It's process that we got to meet. And guess what? It's fees we got to pay. So all those things come through when we happen. And I'm gonna let Mr. Melvin give you a little background of how he got started in this in this thing. A lot of folks might be new to it, but Mel, how long you been working with this 203K stuff?
Well, actually, thank you, Mr. Bazemore, for having me back again. To answer your question, the short answer is somewhere around 31, 32 years for the 203K. Yes. So I've been. I didn't start off as a consultant. I just ended off being a consultant. That wasn't my starting point. That's where I'm finishing.
Yeah. So tell us, how did you get started in this 203K? I mean, what was it? You was just trying to figure out how to rehab so people could have their personal homes, or what was going on?
Well, actually, thanks for asking. I started off as a general contractor. I was a general contractor right out of high school. I had a huge circle of colleagues, and they were lenders and realtors, and they pretty much kept me busy as a GC. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of got burned out as the GC, and our relationship was, so thick, that they say, hey, look, we really need you, why don't you just be a home inspector? You'll be a good home inspector. I'll say, well, what is that? So they kind of coached me into becoming a home inspector. So I became a home inspector, and I just started doing small jobs, kitchens and bathrooms and some basements, and that was pretty much it. And then the client base, kind of like wore me down. And I'm talking about, when you start getting worn down to your socks, you got to make some decisions, So I'm complaining to them again. I say, hey, look, I'm just not, sure about this, And so they say, hey, look, you should be a 203K consultant. And I'm looking, I'm like, well, okay, so what exactly is that? So they hooked me up with somebody in Philadelphia, and they gave me the rundown. And then I became a 203K consultant. But they do ask for so much information. And that was back then. Now, I don't know what's happening now, but in my opinion, you need to have a construction background to be a good consultant. To me, that's very, very important. And so here I am, and I think it's probably been a little longer than 31 or 32 years, but pretty much that's, how long I've done this. And so the building, the inspection, the maintenance, the community building, the community wealth, that whole circle has been my whole life.
Wow. So getting it all done. But that background in construction was what laid the point. And why is that so valuable? We talking about a 203K here. You probably got to know the kind of work they need to be performed, or outline scopes of work and stuff like that, I take it.
Yeah, well, the first thing you have to understand is you do have to have a construction background, but you do need to understand the FHA guidelines. Okay,
Mm,
so the FHA guidelines are put there for a reason. Okay, so many times people just think that you can just brush by the guidelines, but that's not necessarily so.
hmm.
They're not going to let you skate by, if you're not meeting FHA guidelines. They are, they do have a standard that you need to meet as a consultant and as a consumer, which is very important. So, with that being said, yeah, to me, in my opinion, you must have construction background and you must know the FHA guidelines.
Wow, and that's so important. FHA guidelines. Good evening, Nicole. She joining us tonight as well. But we have so many things with these guidelines where folks don't probably understand that this FHA, they got to fund the loan. They're funding the loan. They're going through the process.
Hmm.
So, Mr. Mel, I'm going out there. I'm using myself for example. I'm going out there. I see this house. It needs some work. It's perfect area for me to live in.
Hmm.
It'll be ideal for me to get it. But what's my first step when I know I need a tub? The tub might be cracked, or the floors might be need some work, and the window. So what's my first guideline? I take my realtor. I'm pre-approved already,
Hmm.
so I'll go out there and take my realtor with me. Do I take the consultant with me then, or after once I start to put the offer in?
So normally, when I do the workshops, I will explain to people that you got to do your homework first. You need to make sure that this particular property can meet your need. Okay, so and there's a few parameters in there as to whether or not you have a family already, or you want to grow a family, or do you need this house to be by a school, and then is this house going to be a liability or is it going to be an asset? Okay,
Mm.
so those are some things that you need to get worked out. And then once you come to the conclusion that I've worked out those things, this house it would be good for me. My realtor say that this house is available. You should ask your realtor some important questions like, what are the comps in the community?
Mm.
So, what are the comps in the community? How much are they asking for this property? Then the consultant comes into play to help you to understand about how much money you're probably going to be spending in order to get this house to FHA standards.
Right, 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 right.
Okay. So, with that being said, right there, there's a strong possibility, that you could have equity in your house at the end of the construction.
Wow. Wow. And that's important. That equity is so important. And tell me, you run the comps. Where do I want to be with comps? I mean, if I'm approved for 300,000, they trying to sell us house for 180,000. It looked like that I might need $75,000 worth of work. I mean, is that enough room, or should I be someplace different?
Well, you always want to have you never want to max yourself out for number one. You,
Right.
you, you don't want to be house poor. You don't want a house that's too big for you. Um, so with that being said, it's important to understand the numbers. Okay, so if you are able to bring this house to the table at the end of the construction and have 30, 40, $50,000 at the end of the construction, you're ahead of the game.
Mm.
Okay. And I always use those numbers, and I tell people if you're a person whose family has never been to college, here's a great opportunity for you to get that income, at the lowest interest rate that you're ever going to get. So you might want to look into this.
Mm.
Yes. So yes, you want to do your numbers. You want to talk to a couple of contractors to make sure you can get some quality work. You want to get some good numbers on the estimate. Your consultant should assist you with those things. I know I do.
Mm-hmm. And I got a question here. It said, can you explain the difference between a standard 203K loan and a limited 203K loan? What's the
Okay,
difference?
so the 203K loan does have two legs, 203B and 203K. Okay, now 203B, some people call it streamline, some people call it limited. It's the same
Mm-hmm.
thing. Okay, so now under the new guidelines, you can do a 203B or streamline for
Mm-hmm.
75,000 and under. Okay. A few months ago, it was 35,000 and under. I prefer the 35,000 because when you start getting around $75,000, you know you're in pretty deep water there if something happens.
Mm.
You know,
A lot to move.
um, and things do happen.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the streamline or limited. The limited is the 75,000 and under, and but you cannot do anything structural. You can't do major upgrades. They don't allow any of those things like that. The 203K is a full rehab process in which you can build an entire house if you got a piece of property there. In other words, if you have a plaque there, if it meets the square footage, you can build a whole brand new house on it, or you can tear
Yeah.
down a whole house and rebuild it on a 203K. So
Yeah.
that's the difference. One is
And
75,000 and under. The other one is unlimited, and it has numbers that you have to adhere to.
so you said something extravagant. you know, what are we talking about extravagant? Not what are we talking about light duty and heavy duty when we talking about the construction aspect of it?
So if you're doing cosmetic things, painting, you're getting some screen doors. You're getting all new interior doors. You're getting uh some minor upgrades to your bathroom, um but no not plumbing. You're not putting in a new furnace. You're not doing a heavy up on your electrical. You're not getting a new roof. um you're not moving walls. You know how people
Mhm.
love the open concept. You cannot get a 203B or limited with that type of desire.
Oh,
But the 203K, you can get all those things. Um, I like I said, I prefer the 35,000 because the safeguard for the consumer is there, and that's what's important to me.
right. And that is so important for it. So you would recommend that they go with the standard 203K when they doing it.
I always recommend what's best for the client.
Okay.
Now, a lot of the lenders are still going with consultants on the limited because the regs say that you don't need a consultant, but the lending institution, they understand what I understand. The consumer is in danger, to a degree where we have to watch them. So let's just put our guy on it, at least to get them off the ground.
Mm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
To be clearly transparent, I have a limited going on right now where um, I thought that it should have been a full K, but the client did not want to do a full K. Um, and once the project got started, they ran into some difficulties, and so now they want to terminate the contractor. Um, uh, and I know why, and it's because you should have gotten a full 203K there, where you had a person in the middle to mediate to understand what's happening here. Okay,
Mm.
because you have line items. If you have a line item, for example, that says, to paint your whole house interior, and let's say it's $10,000 to paint your house. Okay, um, that doesn't necessarily mean that the whole 10,000 going just to paint. No, there's half go to labor, the other half is material.
Mm.
Okay, there's people that seem to think that that whole wad of money
Hmm.
goes to what they want, you know, and that's really what's happening on this project I mentioned earlier. You know, she wants the higher grade appliances in her kitchen, which exceeds the amount of money that's allotted for her to get the refrigerator, stove, and whatever else. So now they're going back and forth.
And welcome, KJ. He done joined here as well. But another question. Somebody said, "Can you use a 203K loan for your investment property?"
Short answer, no.
So you tell
So
me I can't go in there and just do it, and then after 6 months, flip it over to my investment.
you're supposed to stay in your property for 1 year. Okay. Um, and you would think that they're not checking up on you. You just never know.
Right.
Okay. About 15 years ago, I was doing heavy work for M&T, and I was doing quality control work for the 203K program. And they asked me to go down to this one neighborhood and do a quality control inspection. That was another consultant facilitated the project. And then they called me and said, "Hey, does the property look like someone lives there?"
Mm.
So I was like, "Okay, that's a different question." So later on down the road, I found out that the property was owned by a police officer, and he was not living there. And as you know, it has to be your primary residence, okay,
Mm.
at least for 1 year. And so he pretty much got jammed up.
Oh wow.
He did.
Oh wow.
So I
Yeah.
didn't know that they were using me for that particular. I was just doing my job.
Yeah, for it and stuff to find out what's really going on out there and this and with this document. I mean, now we done hired you, Mr. Melvin. You done gave us the all the good stuff. What is your step into the process once we say, hey, Mr. Melvin, we're going to use you as our consultant?
Mhm.
Where do we go from there?
Well, the first thing I do is I say, "Okay, what's your availability?" Once we set an appointment, we go out and we walk the property. When we walk the property, all of my clients get a free FHA inspection because I'm going to walk the property and I'm going to talk out loud and tell you what my eyes see. Okay,
Mhm.
I know I have seasoned eyes, and being in this industry for so long, you just see things when they ain't right, you know. And I'll say, "Okay, what you gonna do with this room here? I can clearly see this room needs maintenance. Okay, whether the wall has some issues to where what we call alligator skin, and that's where water has gotten inside, and then there's peeling paint all on the wall. That tells me a couple things. Number one, that water has been leaking from someplace upstairs.
Mm.
Okay, and we have to address that. You cannot have any peeling paint in your house nowhere. Um, so I'm gonna walk the property. I'm gonna tell you what I see, and then I'll ask you some basic questions. What are we gonna do with this kitchen? As you know, at the end of the construction, this property
Mhm.
must be habitable. Full stop.
Mhm.
Full stop. Habitable. That don't
Explain that, Mel.
that
Explain.
means that it must be a turnkey property. Somebody else must be able to buy that house and move right in. If you lose the property, they can sell that property again and someone else move right in at the end of the construction. Simple as that. Now, you must have appliances. If you don't have appliances, the house is not habitable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? If the
Mm-hmm.
furnace doesn't work, it's not habitable. If you don't have a hot water tank, it's not habitable. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty basic there. So getting back to my process, I walk through the house and I'll ask you, what are we doing in this room? How do you want to address this? Then I'll ask you, what are your needs? What would you like to do with this property? Because my question will always be, are you interested in making this house your house?
Mm.
Okay. Once they say yes, okay, so what do you want to do? You want to add another bathroom? You want to remove a wall? Um, you want to do an addition? What do we need to do to make this your house? And then
Right.
we're going that direction right there. And then I'll help you to understand how to facilitate that process. After that, we'll get some estimates from some contractors. I will assist you with that by going over those areas of concern, and then I'll do what's called a scope of repair write-up. So what does that mean? That means I will take the estimate from the contractor and I will put it in FHA form. Okay.
Mm,
That means that you will have three components, on your scope of repair write-up. You will have a scope, you have a material cost, and a labor cost. Okay, that is the 203K, standard process in order for the lending institution to understand what's happening with this particular loan. Okay, your contractor, I will assist him, or at least give him an idea as to what I need from him, because his estimate and my scope of repair write up must mirror.
mm.
Okay, so we can't have two conflicting things going on there. Okay. So after that, we'll do the write up, um, and then we'll go into getting you signed to all your documents and get you to the lending institution and get you to closing. Once you get to closing, your contractor will have 30 days to start work. Okay. And then after that, it will be my responsibility to come back and do what's called re-inspections. Those re-inspections is to assure that the contractor is completing the task that's on the documents that we created. I will take photos. I will create some documents for him to get paid. We'll sign them and send them to the lending institution, and the lending institution will cut a two-party check.
Yeah. And when you said two party, what do you mean?
Two-party. In the olden days, all the checks came to the homeowner, and which is one party, which means that, or in other words, it was problematic, at least for us consultants, because we had, I know I've had contractors show up at my house and say, "Hey, dude, where's my money?" I said, "Sir, sir, I don't work at the bank. Okay, the bank cuts checks. I
Mhm.
do my job by facilitating the paperwork and the photos. You signed it. I've sent it off. We're waiting for the bank to send you your check." Okay. So the consultants all got together. We all signed a petition to get the FHA to say, "Hey, look, we need to change this. We need to fix this." So now the checks are two parties. So that means that the contractor's name will be on the check and the homeowner. So you can't cash without him, and he can't cash without you.
Hmm. Another question we have: what is a typical eligible criteria to obtain a 203K loan? I mean, going from the standpoint of going to a house, how do I know if that house is eligible for that?
Well, for the house to be eligible, well, first let me say that when it comes to the potential homeowner qualifying, that will be a lender question. Okay, I normally like to stay in my lane. As for the property qualifying for 203K, the property would need to be in a condition to where it needs rehab work, which means that it does not meet FHA guidelines or FHA standards, meaning that the porch could be rotted, um, or the appliances don't work, the furnace doesn't work, or the house has been vacant for a year or two, and when you go inside of there, you got lead paint, chip paint, things of that nature. Um, that clearly puts it into the 203K realm for sure.
And I'm gonna tell you from, as Mr. Melvin said, I'm gonna tell you from the lender standpoint that you're gonna have to make sure that these aren't full value houses on the resale market. What do I mean by that is that the house is on there for 250 and you still need 35 to $75,000 worth of work. And as we talked before, the ARV after repair value is 250. That's not going to work for a 203k loan. A 203k loan is based on a lower value and it needs repairs to come equivalent to what the market value goes in that area.
Right.
Without that, that's going to happen. Another question, will my interest rate be higher? It depends what type of 203k. We also have a 203k down payment assistance program that helps you with closing costs, which, yes, your interest rate is going to be higher. It's because they're investing more money into that property now. So if you qualify for 5.99, we're looking at you're going to be at 7% maybe if you're going to get that down payment assistance. If it's repairable or non-repairable, it's going to be dependent on the product that we're using for that. So for that, or the lender that we're using for that. So we got to keep that in mind. So the rate can be higher, and sometimes normally it is a little higher than your normal rate because the investor's taking a bigger investment in you to purchase this property. And how do they protect their investment? Through interest rates and making sure that they can make a decent profit on it for it. You asked, does a 203k loan have an adjustable and adjustable rate or a fixed rate? It's normally a fixed rate. For it. They do have adjustable rates now.
Mm-hmm.
Don't lose a scope, because that from a banking standpoint, that's an investment. That's a money maker for us to get to this to where we need to be profitable as a business. So you can have either one when you come to it, but normally we have fixed rate loans when we do the 203k, because normally you're in the FHA, which means you're probably a new buyer or you don't have the money to do these repairs. That's why we're going through this. And then I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Melvin here, because my next question is gonna be based on it. And then that you have to make monthly payments on a loan while the home is being renovated. They have a payment plan for you that outlines what that payment's going to be for it, and how it's gonna work out. So you will have that in place. My next question, Ms. Melvin, I don't need a FHA loan. I'm a conventional buyer. Can I still do we have a conventional 203 product? 203k product?
Yes. So the conventional loans, they're identical. The only difference is there's a couple guidelines that's just missing from one to the other, but it's the same process. There's just a couple guidelines there, that your lender should talk over with you, but it's almost identical. For me, whether I'm just doing a conventional or a Fannie Mae, Freddie, don't matter. The process is always the same, and I just go about it in the same fashion. So yes, a lot of these guidelines are protective of the consumer.
Right.
That's what they're there for. And going back to the higher interest rate, once you close and you're in the property for a few months,
mm-hmm.
If it's too high for you, then what should I do?
Right.
Refi. You know what I'm saying? Just refi. I'm saying, but because you don't want to let a good property that you've got equity out of just get away from you because of 2 or 3 points that just put it out for a couple months, or 3 months, and then just refi and because if your credit is in order, this is an easy do.
Mm-hmm. Does a mobile home qualify for a 203k?
Oh no, I've never done a mobile home in my 30 some odd years. No, I'm, and I have the book here of the new. I've been studying the new guidelines. As you know, we got some new stuff came down the pipeline, and they mentioned nothing about a mobile home there.
So that's good to know, because a lot of folks look at that's affordable housing and everything, but that's a good point, because some folks might go out there and think a mobile home probably costs about 75,000. Is that right?
Well, there's no money. There's no money into the mobile home scene. I'm saying, I do know a couple of people who are um, into that arena, to where they buy mobile homes, fix them up, and then resell them. Um, and they're buying mobile homes for $5,000 and $10,000 that's move-in
Mm,
ready.
mm,
So, where's the lender going to make money on that?
right. It's no money to be made on that.
That's a
And
that's a credit card purchase.
you're right. That is. Tell me this. What's one of the biggest obstacles we have in this 203K process? I found a home, I done hired you for it and everything, but um, what stands out once we get to that point? Is it finding a good contractor, or me believing that Mr. Melvin gonna find me a contractor?
So there's a couple of answers in there. Number one, one of the biggest obstacles is that a lot of folks want more than their pocketbook can afford. That's
Mm,
a real thing. Okay. Number two, they want the cheapest contractor they can find. That's a real thing. I do have a saying for that, and it is pretty simple. Good work ain't cheap, and cheap work ain't good. Okay. Um, and then sometimes I'll ask them to say it with me so they can get a full grasp of what that really means. Good work ain't cheap, and cheap work ain't good.
break that down for them. Break that down. Break that down.
So, the other thing, the other answer, the third answer I have for you is, I do have a circle of contractors that I utilize. However, I never ever mention any of the contractors that I know until my client call me and say, "I've tried, I can't find anybody. Can you help me?" And then I'll say, "Okay, here's three guys. Here's
Hmm.
three guys. These guys are 203K savvy, and we're going to be okay because they're under my umbrella." And
Hmm.
that's how I address that. Because to me that's very important. Okay,
Yeah. Can
because
these
I need contracts that can deliver. You can't deliver, then that's a different conversation.
Yeah, we got Devon Crawford. Welcome. Can these type of loans be used on your own house for repairs, and when possibly selling or refinancing and staying in? So, Miss Mel, I'm gonna let you. So, can I use a 203K is for to be used on my home to move in
Yes,
for, but I can't refinance my home into a 203K loan, which is going to be a no.
that's a yes. You can. You can refinance, and then you can do work on your property. Okay. I do them all the time. If your back porch is falling down, you can refire your house, and then you can get a 203K, and we can build you a new porch. What we can't do is we can't build you a swimming pool, but we can build you a porch.
Mm. So it's
Okay.
limited on the repairs.
So, let's take it a step further. Let's just say that, that you've inherited the house from your family, and the house is what I call trapped in time. Okay, that means that nothing's been done for 30 years in the house. The kitchen is still in the 70s or the 80s, and the bathrooms are a wreck. Yes, you can refi, do a 203K, and then we can do total upgrades. You can get a full gut and a full rehab on a
Wow,
refi.
isn't that
As
amazing?
as long as the equity is in the house and you qualify.
You see that, folks? I'm gonna stop 'em right there. You see that 410-499-1192? Y'all better save that number. He just gave y'all a good tidbit right there for when you trying to refinance your home update the home because you have the equity in there.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of finding it, 203K it. So
Mm-hmm.
we can go ahead and finance that for you, and you'll have your consulting right there to give you some guidelines of what needs to be done, how that needs to be done, and when it needs to be done for it, so it can meet that guideline. So, Mr. Melvin, if I'm in a conventional loan, can I come back to a 203 FHA loan to get that done, or will I stay in conventional?
Well, you can leave a conventional loan anytime you want to, because once you've closed on your property, you can do what you want, and then you can just switch over. Your realtor or your lender should be able to help you with that. That's an easy do. Um, so I don't know the guidelines on what they will require on the lender side of it. But the consulting side is pretty simple. I'll get the call, I'll go over, I'll say, okay, you can do this, you can do that, but we can't do this. Okay. For example, I had a client down in Washington, D.C. who had an in-law house. And I knew that you can get your in-law house worked on in the 203K process. The lending institution was unaware and they pushed back. So I had to go in the books. I had to dig it up, and I wouldn't dare say to my client, I'm not getting paid for this, but I'm not getting paid for this, but I got them through. And if the in-law house is part of the existing house, okay, then it qualifies. Okay. But if it's not part of the existing house, then that's a different conversation.
Mm-hmm. Break down the difference here. I got a question here. The difference between the FHA 203K versus construction loan, which is construction from the ground up, and 203K is a rehab loan.
So, a construction loan is different in definition through the lending institution. Okay. The 203K, you must have something with under the auspice of it existing. For example, let's just say that my grandparents left me a house and the whole house fell down, but I still own the land. Okay. So I'll dig into the rigs, and then the rigs will tell me that as long as that plot is meets this square footage, then I qualify to get a rebuild on that lot. Okay. Now, some lenders will say, oh, well, that's a new construction, and then we just go to another lender that knows better.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, because I've done total rehabs where this person ain't have nothing left but some sticks. Really, I'm telling you, man, some sticks. And so I had to get into the rigs. I say, hey, look, the foundation is still here. There's no house here, but the foundation is still here. The basement is still here. We can build on top of this.
Right.
Yeah, the lending institution, they lost their wig, man. They was like, no, you can't do that. That's considered a new construction. I said, well, a total rehab is new construction.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not a total new construction, meaning that, we're not excavating and we're not doing any of those things. However, it's still considered new construction.
Right. And that's what folks don't understand. This creative financing with JB, you just got a nugget right there of things that we have to work through to get through.
That's right.
For so you understand what needs to happen when it comes to getting these houses, construction and building, and as he was talking about excavating, and the whole blueprints, the plans, the digging. I was advised by my lender that down payment assistance was not available for 203K loans. How have you successfully closed a 203K with a DPA? I have closed a 203K with a DPA.
There you go.
Can I just let you know that it's a little more, it's some steps that able to handle it. I tell a lot of folks like that, the lender's not bad, but everybody don't have the same appetite. So what do I mean by that? I'm gonna go to my big banks. I want the A paper. I want the straight cookie cutter type of stuff, and this is where I'm gonna stay at. And then I got Joe. I'll do any loan LLC bank that say, "Yo, bring that to me. Let's figure out how we put that together to get it done." It is doable. Your interest rate's going to be higher,
Mhm.
and you're going to have to be able to show the work, and you're going to have a consultant. That's the first thing they ask me: is there something you could do in any state, or are you licensed specifically for PA or another state? We're licensed in very several states that I can do those loans in. For it, I just need to know the whole strategy. You can reach out to me at 302-312-9860. So we can talk about that. That is something we're going to talk about, because I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm gonna, once we go through that, Melvin right here is probably gonna be my eyes and ears, so y'all will understand what I need, and he can be the best voice for it in there, because I might have some language for you that you need to understand, and he'll be able to break that down more specifically, so we can get that to underwriting, so we can get that closed. Because you got to be able to understand the parameters of the bank you deal with.
Right.
I'm not knocking any bank. Everybody specializes in different things. You just have to find the bank that specializes that, and
That's
and
correct. That is correct.
for it. So like Melvin's give you a couple of things about, some people consider new construction because you don't have it up, but you just putting it back, which is 203K. You know,
Hmm.
and stuff. Some lenders only want to do that 75K 203K. you
Right.
know. Where they limit the amount of money you get, but we have lenders that can exceed that. And when you exceed that, then you like, oh man, this makes more sense than what I'm doing here. For it. The number one more time is 302-312-9860. Give us a call so we can talk about it. You're welcome. For it. That's why we have our creative ideas here. Hello, Miss Isabel. We have our creative ideas here that we use for y'all attention, that we pass on. So when you're looking for those, we can provide the answers and a plan that we need to get that done. So, Mr. Melvin, the big question is, I'm doing a 203K, and I found out, and the contractor found out, we need to add to that because we forgot something. How do we handle that?
So you mean that you ran into a situation that was unforeseen
Yes.
while doing the construction?
Mhm.
So in the 203K, there's something called a contingency fund. So the contingency fund will be 10%, 15%, and as high as 20% for what's called unforeseen. That means that if we run into a problem, okay, there's funding available for you to deal with that situation. Let me give you a real time example. So if the contractor tears off the shingles off your roof, and the plywood and the rafters are rotted, okay, he'll call me up. I'll come over, take a look at it, take some photos. I'll call you, send you some photos, and then you and I have a conversation. Say, okay, we need to get this fixed so he can close up the roof. We would do what's called a change order. That change order will have a certain amount of money there that's used just specifically for that reason. Because
Mm.
once you close on the 203K, you're not going back to the bank and say, hey, look, can I get 30,000 more? No, no. So, and the contingency is very important because you only can see what's in front of you. But
Mm.
once you start opening up some of these older homes, you find stuff,
Right.
and you want to be able to deal with it. So that contingency money is important. Now, I base my contingency number on the condition of the property. If I'm in an older property and I can clearly see that I'm going to run into, or the contract's going to run into some issues once he start opening up these walls. I said, I think you should use a 15% contingency. That way you have enough money. So then what happens to the 15% contingency if you don't use it? It goes on the backside of your loan and your payment decreases.
Wow.
Okay. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But I hardly ever get people that have money left over. They normally want to upgrade their kitchen. Hey, Mr. Henson, how do I upgrade my kitchen? I have $10,000 left in my contingency. You know, I want to change out, this granite to Corian or what have you, and then I'll show them how to do that. Some lending institutions will be argumentative, and they say, well, the contingency only for safety issues. I'll just tell my client, don't stress yourself. In 30 years, I know the verbiage. I'll get it done.
Now, this is a good one here, and the question is, I'm in a duplex, 203K,
Okay.
for I have a small apartment building, which you live upstairs. I want to turn the downstairs into a store now. Can I use a 203K to convert that?
So 203K does have specific guidelines. They do allow you a certain square footage for a commercial. So we would have to go into the rigs and see what that square footage is. So that would be a yes based on the square footage that we're looking at. In other words, they're not going to let you, take 3/4 of the space to make it commercial, and then you got a little room back there that's big enough for a bathroom, and that's where you live. They're not going to allow that.
Yeah, and that makes sense. A lot of people never even considered using the 203K for that type of investment, that type of property for it. So can I do a duplex with a 203K loan, or a triplex, long as I live in one of those? Because FHA have that 1 to 4 unit, that long as I live in one, I can still get that FHA loan. But can I do a 203K on a 4 unit?
So I have an influx of people coming from other states coming to Baltimore, and all they're interested in is multi units.
Okay.
Okay. So the answer to your question is yes. Okay. Um, you have to agree to live in one of the units, as you just mentioned, but the other 3 units, or the other 2 units, or the other unit, must meet FHA guidelines also.
Perfect. Long as y'all live in one of those units, y'all hear? One of those units. The other 3 can be anybody else.
Right.
One of those units, you can do that 203K loan for, because it's a 1 to 4 for that. And when you get into that realm of multi-use type of homes, Mr. Melvin, another question that stands out. I'm getting I got a 203K loan, and you mentioned this. I have some money left over for it, but I didn't have that in my scope of work because I didn't use all the money. Do I need to send the lender a new scope of work because I'm adding that, or how do I do that?
So you're saying that you have money left over in your contingency?
In your
But that's the only place you can have money left over, because
Yes.
there will be no money left over in your scope of repair, because that's the contractor's money, and you will be signing a contract that you
Right.
owe him that amount to do the work that you agreed to. So if you have money left over in your contingency, it's never a good idea to wait till the end of the project or the last draw to want to utilize that funding.
Okay.
Because once we're close, it's over.
Right.
Long as the project is in process, we can be creative. We can't go too far out. We can't color too far out the lines, but there are things that we can do with that money being available.
Right. So if you have that money in your contingency,
Right.
you're not going to have money left over in your scope of work budget that you already have because that's already accounted for.
Right. Right.
Um,
That belongs to the contractors because you're going to sign a contract. So let's talk about the contracts for a second. So you're
okay.
going to have three contracts. You're going to have my contract. You're going to have the lender's contract. Well, I will facilitate for the lender. And then you will have the contractor's contract. So you will be signing a contract. All three of those contracts will have the exact same number that you are agreeing to pay the contractor to facilitate that particular work. Now, the contingency money, let's just say you have $20,000 in your contingency. Okay. We will not be using that contingency inside your scope of work in the very beginning of the project. That's not only illegal, meaning that let's just say that the contractor is telling you that he's asking for say $30,000 for your new kitchen. So you only have 20,000. So we can't say in the very beginning that we'll use 10,000 out of the contingency. No, no, we won't be doing that
Mm,
because not only is it illegal, but it puts people in jeopardy.
mm-hmm.
See, now, if we get into the project and we open up the wall and we see termite damage, or we see where, the wall is crumbling and we need an extra $10,000, then I can get the $10,000. But we're not going to talk about in the very beginning of the project breaking the law. We won't be doing that.
Not breaking the law.
No, no, we won't be doing that.
Yeah. So the contingency, we see that we done open it up. We done almost close everything up. That contingency money's there. At what point do we say, hey, we're not going to use it? Can we do something else?
When we start to close, as a retired GC, when you start closing, okay. So let's talk about closing for a second. Closing means that you've already passed all of your rough end inspections, and you've got to go ahead to close up the walls. Once you're ready to close up, okay, there's not going to be any more unforeseens. Because we've already demoed, we've already did the rough end, we've already did the rough end mechanicals, we've already did the rough end framing, we've already did the installation. We're ready to close up now. So now that $20,000 is still sitting there, and then you can say, okay, I want to upgrade the cabinets.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get the soft closing cabinets now. I want to, I want to get, I want to upgrade the appliances. I can help you do that when you're ready to close up. But before you close, you can run into problems. Okay, like there's a strong possibility that you might all of a sudden need a heavy up on your electrical. So yeah, so once you're ready to close, you can utilize, in my opinion, and on my shift, okay, my clients will have access to their contingency.
Right, which makes sense to have that. We're not gonna prepare that in the beginning.
Right. Because contractors will come after your contingency in the beginning. They will come after it if you let them.
Oh, and tell us what you mean when you said come after it.
That means that their intentions, for example, let me give you a real life example. So I never tell contractors my background because none of their business. So I'm standing there and they're explaining to my client. My client says to them, well, I want an open concept. And then he's explaining to him what he's going to do, okay, to give her open concept. She said, I could tear this wall down right here, but I didn't hear him say I need to install LVLs to support the upstairs. Okay. That's an easy $5, $8, $10,000 cost right there. If he's not mentioning that, then that means that he's probably going to come after her contingency once we inside the project. No, tell her right now. See, I need you to tell her that right now that that we have to allot this amount of money for LVLs to support the flooring upstairs. So that's a real thing right there. A lot of contractors do that. They won't tell you the whole truth. Okay, they'll say, okay, we'll tear this wall down and then we'll move this floor over there, and I'm standing there. I'm like, well, are you going to support the upstairs? Are you going to? I don't say it. why they there, but when they leave, I say, look, this is what we need to do. We're going to put this in there, and we're going to allot this amount.
Hmm. And what's LVLs? Could you explain that to our audience here?
LVLs are beams that goes from one part of your house to another one, okay, in order to support the upstairs. So if you remove a low burn wall in your house, then the upstairs need to be supported, okay? And the LVLs are load bearing beams that go across your house in order to support it. Okay. That's the generic way of giving a person a clear vision how that works.
Right, for it and stuff. So you hear why that stuff's important. You just don't go knocking down walls and don't have a plan for how we're gonna make sure we still sturdy and we still have a stable home. Nobody falling through the ceiling,
Right.
uh, because we didn't secure that in the proper manner. But that's good. You got to know your contractors, folks. I mean, some of your friends might be contractors and stuff.
Mm.
Test their work. What I mean, they got to bring you some references with some finished work they have done and some good, strong background in that. License, insured for it, so you can be able to hold them accountable. We don't want to scare them and say, hey, are you licensed and bonded? We're going to have to make sure that's available because we're going to have to submit that. We're going to have to make sure that we have that documentation for when we are doing the loan of that licensed, bonded, insured contractor. Because the bank want to know that we ain't just hiring Joe Smoke off the corner.
It's still happening, brother. It's still happening.
Doing,
I have a corporate lawyer right now, and she asked me, would it be okay if the contractor that she hired allow her guy to work on the house? I said, no, ma'am. That is something that if a contractor is smart, he would never allow that because he's taking on that liability.
mm-hmm.
Okay. So she wanted that. She also wanted her father to stay in the house while the construction was going on. I said, no, ma'am, that's not recommended. She kept pushing back. Well, they can start in the basement. I said, man, let me help you out just a little bit. The only thing needs to happen is for the contractor to pull up this carpet and a cloud of dust go up them steps and put your dad in a coughing frenzy. He's 83 years old.
Mm.
That could be ugly.
Mm-hmm.
I said, we have to think about those things. It can happen. For a young person could go into a coughing frenzy from a cloud of dust. So if you're in your 80s, I said, no, ma'am. She said, well, the contractor guy, I know he don't have no license, but he do good work. I said, I don't recommend that. And any contractor that's got a license should never allow that
Right,
because something happens, he's liable.
right.
That's on his shift, and and I always tell people, it's not good to hire the guy to live up the street for $20 and a pint of wine.
Right.
Okay, it's not good. He does your brakes for you. He put the patch on your roof. Now you want to put in the cabinets in your kitchen. He fixed your plumbing. No, it's not a good idea. It's just not good business savvy. It's not.
Right. Folks, man, we had a great time tonight. We came to it, man. I want to thank Mr. Melvin for that knowledge, as always. For remember, his numbers running across the screen, 410-499-1192. Give him a call. Find out what's happening. Or if you want to send him an email to tiffany'scon@msn.com, that'd be perfect as well, so we can make sure that y'all stay in contact. Y'all have the resources y'all need to get these things done. You have a 203K consultant that has years of experience that wants to give you the opportunity to utilize it. Utilize it until he's not going to be able to say, hey, I don't do that no more. And then you're like, oh man, who do I go to, Mr. Melvin? He'd be like, I don't even know because I don't go to them myself, So utilize him, get the knowledge you need so you can work and have a stable home. And this is a new wave, folks. We don't find those homes out there all fixed up and get a good deal on them no more. So 203K is our resource now. Get you a good house, get this consultant in here, and let's get them moving. Mr. Melvin, if you got some closing words, I want to thank you again for coming on, spending some time with us, and you can close us out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bazemore. So, just so folks know, I do feasibility studies. I work in the communities around the state of Maryland. My range is from the top part of Virginia to the bottom part of PA. I ride that 95. That's my area there. And I do a multitude of work around the city in the community associations, revitalizing the community. And that's all I do. I'm a full-time consultant. I work in the community a lot, and don't hesitate to call or email, and I'll be more than glad to help you out.
Right. This Creative Financing with JB. We will see you next week. Man, glad you tuned in. Hope you got something out of it. But y'all have a great evening.